Hey there, ready to step back in time with me? Today we're taking a deep dive into two incredible stories of resilience,
Oh.
both set against the backdrop of one of the world's most recognizable landmarks, the Empire State Building. You might think, you know this iconic skyscraper,
Right.
but trust me, these stories will give you a whole new perspective.
What's so compelling about these stories is how they showcase the human spirit's ability to overcome even the most unimaginable challenges.
Yeah.
We're talking about a plane crash, a plunge in elevator, and a battle against organized crime,
Wow.
all within the shadow of this towering symbol of American ambition.
Okay, so let's start with a scene that sounds like something straight out of a movie. Picture this.
Okay.
It's a foggy July morning in 1945.
Right.
World War II is winding down and a sense of relief is in the air. But
Wow.
then, out of nowhere, a B-25 bomber crashes into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building.
It's a moment that really makes you question how something like that could happen. How does a military plane end up colliding with one of the tallest buildings in the world? Well, it's a story of fog miscalculation and a series of near misses that'll leave you wondering how anyone survived at all.
And amidst this chaos, we meet Betty Lou Oliver, an elevator operator who just happened to be working her last day at the Empire State Building. Talk about bad timing, right?
It's almost hard to believe, but Betty Lou's story isn't just about surviving the initial impact of the crash.
Right.
She also endured a 75-story plunge in a Plumpton elevator car.
What?
You see, the impact of the crash weakened the elevator cables.
Oh, no.
And as Betty Lou was being transported down, those cables snapped, sending her on a terrifying free fall.
Now, to understand how Betty Lou survived, we need to delve into the physics of elevator falls.
Okay.
It's actually pretty fascinating.
You see, the snapped elevator cables ended up coiling at the bottom of the shaft, creating a kind of buffer that absorbed some of the impact. Additionally, as the elevator car plummeted, the rapid descent in the enclosed shaft actually created a cushion of compressed air.
Wow.
It's a phenomenon that might sound counterintuitive, but in this case, it acted as an unintentional safety mechanism.
So let's rewind a bit and set the stage for this dramatic event. It's Saturday, July 28th, 1945.
Okay.
A foggy and humid day hangs over New York City.
Right.
Betty Lou Oliver is finishing up her last shift as an elevator operator at the Empire State Building.
Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel William Smith, Jr., a seasoned pilot with combat experience in Europe, is flying the B-25 bomber from Massachusetts to Newark, New Jersey.
And here's where things get dicey.
Phew.
Due to the thick fog, Smith was flying by visual flight rules, meaning he was relying primarily on his eyesight to navigate.
Right.
This was a common practice at the time, but as we'll see, it could be incredibly risky in poor weather conditions.
Add to that the fact that Smith might not have been familiar with the specific geography of New York City, and you have a recipe for disaster.
As Smith flew over Long Island, the fog got even thicker.
Oh.
He reached LaGuardia Airport, which was already dealing with a confusing situation, as another plane had lost contact with controllers.
Oh, wow.
This added stress and confusion to an already tense environment.
LaGuardia controllers instructed Smith to enter a holding pattern over the Bronx, but the situation was far from stable.
Right.
They also gave Smith a critical warning.
Okay.
Due to the fog, the top of the Empire State Building was not visible.
That warning, unfortunately, wouldn't be enough to prevent the impending tragedy.
It's believed that as Smith continued flying towards Newark, he mistook the East River for the Hudson River, leading him to turn south too early.
This meant that instead of flying over the relatively unpopulated areas of Central Park, he was heading straight towards the densely populated heart of Manhattan.
And to make matters worse, in an attempt to get below the fog or to begin his descent into Newark, Smith lowered the plane to an altitude of roughly 650 feet.
This put the bomber on a direct collision course with some of the tallest buildings in the city.
Witnesses later described the scene as something out of a nightmare. They saw the plane narrowly miss the Grand Central Office Building and several other skyscrapers.
Oh my gosh.
It was flying so low that people in nearby offices could see the faces of those in the cockpit.
Can you imagine looking out your window and seeing that?
Oh, yeah.
Must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. And Smith, realizing the gravity of his error, desperately tried to pull the plane up.
Okay.
He retracted the landing gear and aimed for the sky, but it was too late.
The plane, traveling at approximately 250 miles per hour, simply couldn't change course in time.
At 9:40 a.m., Old John Feather Merchant, as the B-25 was nicknamed, slammed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building.
The impact was devastating. The plane, carrying hundreds of gallons of fuel, exploded in a massive fireball.
Wow.
Windows shattered, debris rained down on the streets below,
Oh my.
and the top of the building was engulfed in flames and smoke.
It was a scene of absolute chaos. Thankfully, because it was a Saturday, fewer people than usual were in the building.
But there were still office workers, elevator operators, and even visitors on the observation deck at the time of the crash.
Tragically, Lieutenant Colonel Smith, his 2 crew members, and 10 people working on the 79th floor were killed instantly.
The impact was so powerful that one man was even thrown from the building, landing on a ledge 4 floors below.
Oh my.
It's hard to even fathom the force of that impact.
Firefighters rushed to the scene, facing a truly daunting task.
Yeah.
They had to battle their way through the inferno and climb stairs from the 67th floor, the highest point they could reach by elevator, to reach the fire on the 78th floor.
And as emergency responders searched for survivors, they found Betty Lou Oliver trapped amidst the wreckage on the 80th floor.
She was badly injured, suffering from a broken back, neck, and pelvis, as well as burns.
Oh, God.
Her condition was critical.
They carefully loaded her onto a stretcher and took her down to the 75th floor, where they placed her in elevator number 6, the only one still operational.
But what they didn't know was that a third fire was raging in the building's sub-basement, caused by the plane's engine falling down an elevator shaft.
No way.
This fire had severely weakened the elevator cables.
And as Betty Lou's stretcher was placed inside the cables, snapped, sent in the elevator, and Betty Lou plummeted 75 stories to the bottom of the shaft.
A 1,000-foot drop.
It's almost unimaginable.
And that's where we'll leave Betty Lou for now, teetering on the edge of survival. But don't worry, we'll be back in a moment to continue this gripping tale of resilience and the surprising role that a young pharmacist's mate played in her fate. Stay with us.
So we left off with Betty Lou Oliver plummeting down an elevator shaft after already surviving the initial plane crash. It's a moment that could easily been the tragic end to her story.
But sometimes fate has other plans. And even in the darkest of moments, there are glimmers of hope. In Betty Lou's case, that glimmer came in the form of a 17-year-old pharmacist's mate named Donald Maloney.
Donald was visiting New York City and had planned to visit the Empire State Building's observation deck that morning. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
Or maybe the right place at the right time, considering what happened next.
As news of the crash spread, Donald's instincts kicked in.
Yeah.
He knew he had to help. So he transformed from a tourist into a first responder.
He rushed into a nearby Walgreens, grabbing morphine syringes, bandages, any medical supplies he could carry.
Wow.
He ran into the Empire State Building, ready to assist in any way he could.
He encountered chaos at the ground level. Elevators were out of service, and the building was in a state of emergency. It would have been easy to get overwhelmed in that situation, but Donald kept his composure and started looking for ways to help.
And amidst the pandemonium, he noticed something peculiar.
Okay.
Elevator number 6, the one Betty Lou had been in, was no longer at its usual position. He realized it had fallen.
He quickly alerted a group of firefighters, and together they investigated the downed elevator.
The impact of the fall had jammed the doors shut, so they had to cut a hole in the side of the car to gain access. Can you imagine what must have been going through their minds as they did that?
It must have been a mixture of hope and dread, not knowing what they would find inside.
Right.
But then there she was, trapped beneath debris.
Oh, wow.
Betty Lou Oliver, still alive.
She had 2 broken legs on top of her already horrific injuries. It's incredible that she survived the fall at all, and it really makes you wonder how that's even possible.
Experts believe that a combination of factors contributed to her survival. We already talked about the snapped elevator cables coiling at the bottom of the shaft, creating a buffer.
Right.
But there's another element at play here, the physics of compressed air.
That's right. As the elevator fell rapidly within the enclosed shaft, it created a cushion of compressed air beneath it.
Yeah.
A difficult concept to grasp, but it essentially slowed the car's descent just enough to make a difference.
And then there's Donald Maloney, who, being small enough to fit through the hole they had cut, climbed into the wreckage to help free Betty Lou.
Wow.
It took almost an hour to get her out.
To think a 17-year-old had the courage and presence of mind to crawl into that mangled elevator car.
Right.
Donald Maloney is truly an unsung hero in this story.
Absolutely. His quick thinking and willingness to act undoubtedly saved Betty Lou's life.
Once they got her free, they rushed Betty Lou to the hospital.
Okay.
She had sustained severe injuries in both the crash and the fall, but incredibly, she made a full recovery. It took 8 months, but she pulled through.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the remarkable ability of the body to heal. But Betty Lou's story doesn't end there.
Here's the most astounding part. Just 5 months after the crash, while still on crutches, she returned to the Empire State Building and rode an elevator all the way to the top.
Can you imagine the strength that must have taken to face that fear head on?
I know.
That's Betty Lou Oliver for you. She refused to let that experience define her.
Betty Lou lived a full life after the crash, eventually passing away in 1999 at the age of 74.
Wow.
She even holds a place in the Guinness Book of World Records as the survivor of the highest elevator fall. Her story is an incredible example of the human will to survive against all odds.
It's truly inspiring. And now for our second story of resilience, we'll travel back to the 1930s when the Empire State Building was still a gleaming new addition to the New York skyline. We're going to meet Eunice Carter, a pioneer and African-American lawyer who took on one of the most notorious figures in organized crime, Charles Lucky Luciano.
Eunice Carter's story is one of meticulous detective work, a passion for social justice, and a sharp mind that saw what others overlooked, a vast prostitution racket operating under the control of the mob.
It's important to remember the context here.
Okay.
The 1930s was the height of the Great Depression.
Right.
New York City was a place of both hardship and opportunity, and organized crime had a grip on the city.
Yeah.
Lucky Luciano was at the top of that criminal food chain.
And amidst this backdrop of lawlessness and social upheaval, Eunice Carter was making history as one of the first black female assistant district attorneys in New York.
She was breaking barriers in a field that was largely dominated by white men, and her journey to get there was undoubtedly filled with challenges.
Initially, Eunice was assigned what seemed like mundane cases, complaints about prostitution.
Okay.
An endless stream of sex workers and their so-called bookers or pimps appeared before her in court.
But Eunice possessed a keen mind and an eye for detail.
Yeah.
She started to notice patterns in the cases that crossed her desk.
It was like she was putting together a puzzle.
Right.
The defenses were similar. The same lawyer kept representing both the sex workers and the bookers, and a specific bondsman always seemed to be involved in securing their release. Something just wasn't adding up.
And Eunice didn't just process these cases. She did something revolutionary for the time.
What's that?
She treated the sex workers with respect and empathy.
Wow.
She listened to their stories.
She recognized that many of these women were trapped in a system of exploitation. They were forced into sex work and then forced to pay a large portion of their earnings to their mob bosses for protection.
Eunice understood that these women weren't criminals, they were victims.
Right.
And that insight would be crucial in taking down Lucky Luciano's criminal empire.
Eunice's careful investigation and her ability to gain the trust of these women led her to convince 3 of them to testify against Lucky Luciano.
Oh, wow.
Their testimonies would become the linchpin in the case against him.
But taking on the mob was no easy feat, especially in a time when corruption was rampant.
Right.
Eunice quickly realized that many of the Vice Squad officers, the ones who were supposed to be fighting prostitution, were actually on the mob's payroll.
She alerted Special Prosecutor Thomas Dewey to this problem, ensuring that the raids on the brothels would be carried out by officers who could be trusted.
This was a brilliant strategic move on Eunice's part. She wasn't just a brilliant lawyer, she was a skilled strategist who understood how to navigate the complexities of law enforcement and politics.
In February of 1936, over 100 sex workers and madams were arrested in a series of raids on brothels across the city.
And with the 3 key witnesses Eunice had secured, Dewey finally had the evidence he needed to bring Lucky Luciano to justice.
But just days before his arrest, Luciano got tipped off about the impending charges and fled to Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Oh, no.
It seemed his luck might hold out after all.
However, as they say, luck can change in an instant.
And in a stroke of irony, a New York detective who just happened to be in Hot Springs on an unrelated case spotted Luciano and alerted Dewey.
Oh, wow.
Talk about bad luck.
Luciano was arrested, extradited back to New York, and arraigned on 90 counts of compulsory prostitution.
Wow.
This legal term essentially means that he was forcing women into prostitution against their will.
His reign of luck was over. The trial began in May of 1936, and although Eunice had played a key role in building the case, she wasn't chosen to actually prosecute Luciano in court.
It's a stark reminder of the prejudices she faced as a black woman in the legal profession at that time.
It's disappointing, but her contributions wouldn't be forgotten.
Right.
Her grandson, Yale professor Stephen L. Carter, later wrote a book about her life and career.
Called Invisible, the forgotten story of the black woman lawyer who took down America's most powerful mobster.
It's a fitting tribute to her legacy. Despite not getting the recognition she deserved at the time, she was instrumental in bringing down a criminal empire.
Back to the trial, the evidence against Luciano was overwhelming.
Phone records, financial ties, and the powerful testimonies of those three women Eunice had befriended.
Right.
It all painted a clear picture of Luciano's guilt.
On June 7th, 1936, Luciano was convicted on 62 counts and sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison.
Wow.
It was a landmark victory, a major blow against organized crime, and it wouldn't have been possible without Eunice Carter's tireless efforts.
It's amazing how these two seemingly disparate stories, both connected to the Empire State Building, highlight the theme of resilience.
Yeah.
We have Betty Lou Oliver survive in not one, but two life-threatening events.
Right.
And Eunice Carter overcoming societal barriers and taking on the mob.
They both faced incredible odds and emerged triumphant.
Right.
It really makes you think about the power of the human spirit. What I find so fascinating is how the Empire State Building, a symbol of American progress and ambition, becomes almost a character in these narratives.
Yeah.
It's a silent witness to these extraordinary acts of courage and determination.
It reminds us that history isn't just about grand events or famous figures. It's about the everyday people who face extraordinary challenges and leave their mark on the world.
Think about it.
Okay.
Every day, people are overcoming obstacles and achieving incredible things, often without any fanfare.
That's true.
It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there's always hope and the potential for greatness.
So the next time you see the Empire State Building, maybe you'll think about Betty Lou Oliver's incredible survival or Eunice Carter's relentless pursuit of justice. They remind us that resilience is not about being fearless. It's about finding the strength to keep going even when things get tough.
It's about facing your fears, challenging the status quo, and making a difference in the world. These are stories that resonate with all of us, no matter what challenges we face in our own lives.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the echoes of these stories and the countless other untold tales that reside within the walls of the Empire State Building and within all of us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.